GALP.
Okay, so pretty much Koei shadow dropped the game and coined a new term for a genre of a game. Today we're going to be talking about Warriors Abyss. Before we do that, let's get into our disclaimer. For you new folks, GALP is a weekly gaming discussion podcast under the GALP Podcast Network. We talk about all sorts of games from big AAA titles all the way to awesome indie games, but our forte is Japanese games, so expect that a lot. We can be found anywhere where you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Whilst you're there, be sure to give us a 5-star review, and remember, if you want to join in on the fun, then follow us on all of our socials. That's Blue Sky, TikTok, Insta, and X at GAL Podcasts. I'm going to say it up front because I don't understand why Koei released this game or who it's actually for. There was no press releases for the game until after they announced it at Sony State of Play. The State of Play itself was quite poor, but the trailer was incredibly hyped for Warriors Abyss. And I think Musou fans rejoiced thinking this game would be a spiritual successor to Warriors Orochi. Really and truly, Warriors All-Stars actually was intended to be the spiritual successor to the Orochi series after its third installment, but I guess that game didn't do so well, and Koei needed to release something after Dynasty Warriors 9. Actually, whoops, I was supposed to pronounce it Dynasty Warriors. Sorry guys, Dynasty Warriors 9. That's why we ended up getting Warriors Orochi 4. And this is a theme Koei has always done, right? They always have a game they keep for emergency. It's often a game they've made using reused assets. That's why the Orochi series has always been a generation or two behind mainline titles. And it makes me wonder, is Warriors Abyss their emergency title? What's the emergency? Dynasty Warriors Origins was a fantastic success in the Western market. In fact, they had just recently sold 1 million copies of the game. Congratulations, Koei, for that. But I've been hearing it hasn't been selling as well in Japan. And honestly, we know that for Koei, Japan is first and foremost their core market. So bad sales results in Japan is truly a cause of concern. Could Warriors Abyss be Koei's attempt to draw attention away from Dynasty Warriors Origins in Japan? I'm not so sure. I have conflicting theories. There is a possibility that Koei released this game now knowing the success of Dynasty Warriors Origins in the West, combined with the fact that roguelike games have seen increased popularity mainly due to the success of Hades and games like that. It might be a cash grab, and I gravitate towards this considering how the game is set up. First of all, Koei announced that there'll be character packs, which admittedly they said for free, starting with the Gene Kingdoms from Dynasty Warriors. But why not give us these characters from the start? The game currently has over 100 playable characters, and you can unlock them using Karma, which is an in-game currency. However, if you played for costume DLC, then you gain access to these characters right off the bat. And I know most outlets won't mention this because Koei gave most outlets, if not all, digital deluxe editions, which features the costume DLC. Now, don't get me wrong, it's very nice of them, but it feels as though it was intentional to help reviewers produce content easily. Without these extra characters and in-game currency known as Karma, then I don't think any of us would have gotten far in this game. Honestly, after 3 hours in, I only managed to clear the first level of hell. This game is incredibly difficult, although it does get easier the more you play and learn patterns of bosses and enemies and level up your characters, etc, and gain access to other characters as well, because I found out that as soon as I unlock Naomasa E, the game becomes very easy. As soon as I unlock Keiji Maeda, the game becomes very easy. As soon as I unlock Takarasu Honda, the game gets very easy. I haven't unlocked Lubu yet, but actually I have the DLC, so I do have Lubu, but I haven't played as him. But I'd imagine the game would be very easy playing as Lubu because he's quite high up on the Karma unlock list. The game is not for the faint of heart. Although I'm not sure who this game is actually for. I think this style of gameplay is certainly quite fun, but it's frustrating, and I'm not sure many Musou fans will enjoy it. Musou has often been linked to mind-numbing fun, and you know what? This game has the movesets mostly intact. With this being a roguelike, there is no jumping. Instead, use the X button to dash and evade, hence Koei's new term for the genre, hack and dash. Pretty smart name, I must say, Koei. And it's incredible that they managed to mix both genres of the game in this way. I think there is just something Koei should have taken more consideration of. The game feels like it's designed primarily for Koei to abuse DLCs at its core. For example, why do we need DLC packs that cost more than the game itself on launch? Why is Koei even offering costume DLC that firstly, you can barely even see and appreciate due to the camera angle and perspective? And secondly, this DLC we previously got for free in its respective game. Orochi 3 had a lot of these costumes as level up unlocks for free, and to add insult to injury, there are DLC costumes that you are paying for that basically consist of Lawson and Famitsu DLC in the past, which were historically free DLC since Dynasty Warriors 7. Sorry, I said Dynasty Warriors. I meant to say Dynasty Warriors. My apologies. On top of that, the fact that Koei is giving us characters in stages is weird. It leads me to think that the first character pack will be free, and then they'll continue to charge for additional character packs. Knowing Koei, and I know this sounds a bit skeptical, but if they decide to do this, I would say they would probably charge around $7.99 for each pack. And if they do this, it's going to set a bad precedent. It's something that the fans are not interested in. They weren't interested in this technique in Dynasty Warriors 9, maybe in DOA, but in Dynasty Warriors, I don't think the audience has ever responded well to character packs. That's not how we do things, Koei. There's also a technical issue that I need to kind of bring up with the game's mechanics. Because there isn't a vertical element to combat, as you know, jump has been replaced with the dash. It means that some characters who usually have aerial EX attacks have been modified. So mainly your Dynasty Warriors characters, to have that move replaced or simply removed. And it kind of brings up this whole conversation because there are some characters traditionally that rely on Musous that are vertical. Those still remain intact. Like, for example, now Masai, if he's doing his Musou where he jumps into the air, that still occurs. You don't actually see most of the animation, but that Musou still is intact. What I'm referring to is characters like Zhao Yun, for example. One of his EX attacks have him thrusting his spear into the air. If you've played Dynasty Warriors 8, you know what I'm talking about. That attack is no longer there. And I can imagine why there isn't characters in Jin that haven't been launched yet. For example, Wang Yuanji also has vertical EX attacks as well. There is many characters that have vertical EX attacks and vertical Musous as well. It also begs the question, are we going to see characters from other series? Some people are like, well, how come we're not going to see Orochi characters or Daji and things like that? We're not going to see characters like that. And I can tell you from now, we're not going to see a character like Ryu Hayabusa. A lot of people are wondering, are we going to see Ryu? No, we're not going to see Ryu Hayabusa because they can't implement the Izuna drop. It just doesn't work in a game like this. So as a result, I don't think we're going to have a Ryu Hayabusa that has no Izuna drop. So yeah, I think Koei's just going to keep this to just Samurai and just Dynasty Warriors characters. Another thing that worries me with potential DLC, especially abuse, is the currencies in this game. There are 3 forms of currency in this game: blood tiers or tears of blood, which allows you to purchase items in Hell; armor, which is used to unlock new formations as well as character bonds; and there was another one, I believe, which is crystals, which can be used to re-roll or gain another bond within Hell. Why do we need 3 forms of currency in this game, and why are they so hard to grind for? This isn't a gacha game, but looking at the game's UI and mechanics, it's very clear that they may have a system where you may, in the future, have to exchange real money for in-game currency, which I'm not a fan of. Like I mentioned, there's a reroll system on the bonds, and it's kind of clear that maybe Koei developed this game with gacha in mind. One can speculate that this was possibly a mobile game that Koei had scrapped previously under Midas and decided, hey, let's bring this to consoles, because this game is a gacha game disguised as a roguelike, and it truly gives off dodgy gacha game vibes. Puts a bad taste in my mouth, especially when the game is £25. Don't get me wrong, £25 is a fair price. This game is so bare bones that I think 15 would have been a better price point. Speaking of bare bones, Koei and Omega Force in recent years have been trying to swipe that under the rug by making games like this that are incredibly menu heavy and complex with all these new systems that we're just expected to understand. It's something that they did with Orochi 4 and its insane amount of menus, and it returns here with menus and character combinations and formation. Most of the time, you don't know what you're doing in this game, and you're going to have to rely on the best formation recommended by the game itself. If the game needs to recommend formations for you, why include that? I didn't know anyone who's going to waste more than a minute trying to figure out who to bring in formation-wise. This game really makes my brain hurt. I was hyped at the trailer during the state of play because I had mentioned in my Orochi 4 review, why can't we see a Warriors game set in hell? Koei listened, we got one, and it was this. The info online as well as press releases mentions billions of character combinations, but it doesn't mean anything when you only get to play as one character throughout your whole time in hell. You can't switch out your characters. The other characters are really just there for support. Even in All-Stars, you were able to change and swap your characters using a timer system. Myself and many others in the internet assumed that this was going to be the successor to Orochi and that you can switch between the characters because, let's be real, this game is an Orochi extra game mode, effectively. You know that one with the miasma? I can't remember the name of the game mode. But oddly enough, that game mode was more in depth and had more substance compared to this game as a whole. And this sort of game I can really recommend only to fans of roguelike titles who also like Koei games. It's a good way to waste a few hours, especially on handheld on a commute. But if you want a real hack and slash experience, this isn't it. If you want a real Musou experience, this isn't it. Musou games often have story behind them, they have meaning. Orochi 3, that game made me cry. Dynasty Warriors 7, when Dian Wei died, that made me cry. There was a level of emotion and attachment to characters. The game pretty much abuses the fact that, hey, you're a Musou fan, you'll already know these characters. You already love these characters. And that is just unfortunate because this isn't a love letter to the fans of the Musou games. This is manipulation, which is unfortunate. I think there are arguably better roguelike games that have been released recently, like Cuisinier. Check out our previous episode for that. I do think the term hack and dash is cute, and I think this game itself doesn't mean much for Koei. It feels like an open beta test for something bigger. And according to my sources, we were supposed to see a new IP from Koei this year. And part of me thinks it might be roguelike related, or maybe this is that new IP. I don't know. Koei is predictable in the sense that they usually use their own IP to test on before launching a big project. For example, Koei gave us Dynasty Warriors Godseekers and then revealed that they were working on Fire Emblem Three Houses. Or, if we want to go way back when to the first Kasen, that game was very bare bones and was focused really on a single battle. It was Koei's way of testing the waters. Now, I could be very generous and think that this is Koei's way of testing the waters for another hack and slash that isn't using the Warriors IP, potentially something that is co-developed by Ruby Party or Midas, Koei's mobile game development team. Or I can just assume that this was something that was originally made by Midas and Koei was like, yeah, let's just sell it to the fans. Anyway, to finish off this episode, I kind of want to pose a question to you guys. What did you want Warriors Abyss to be? Personally, I was hoping Abyss to be a full-on hack and slash experience in the vein of Warriors Orochi, because Orochi 4 was a bit of a disappointment, right? They included too many characters, but not in a bad way, right? Because you needed to include your Samurai Warriors and your Dynasty Warriors characters, but including all these different gods, and the game didn't really kind of become about Orochi. I can see a world in which this game focuses, or a full-on fledged Warriors Abyss could basically focus on that, right? Have these characters basically be in hell and try and figure it out. Because I remember the first Orochi game was very interesting in the sense that these characters didn't know who they were and they had to interact with one another and do that kind of stuff. Like, you know, you've got a character like Nobunaga who's known as the Demon King, right? You could probably play into that, maybe have him sort of rule over hell. That would have been interesting. Have a bit more substance, have a bit more story, you know, and actually recreate the stages, because the stages look kind of cool, you know, the ones that they did show. Of course, they were a bit laggy in some bits, especially in Abyss, right? When you if you're on Cherby, there are like brimstone falling from the sky, and that was cool. If you went near it, it would kind of slow down your game, but that was a cool element. And even then, a lot of it was just shoddily made, like the character models. Koei has no shame. They just reuse the same character models from Orochi and they rename the characters. If you pause the game and take a look, you can see that the character models are exactly the same as the Orochi character models. You know, if you look at the enemy officers, Cottonmouth, you know, like the sort of regular NPCs, they're there in the game. And even the final battle, or one of the final battles, you fight a veteran warrior. Sorry for the spoilers here. You fight a veteran warrior who is basically Takarasu Honda. They didn't even make a new character model. You know, they didn't even make a new moveset for this character. Even Enma, like Enma, who's the character that you kind of played as. Like, I wouldn't have been upset with this game if it was a full-on hack and slash experience and then they gave us the hack and dash as a side mode or as DLC. I don't even mind having to pay £25 if this was a side mode to a fully fledged Warriors Abyss that actually had a story like Orochi. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Warriors Abyss. And I'm intrigued by the concept of it. And I think definitely don't buy this game at full price. Wait for a sale. But I do want to discuss with the community, if we did get a Warriors game set in hell, what kind of game do you want it to be? You know, that's just it. I think it'll be very interesting because I think that's probably the next step for the Orochi series, right? You already now have characters like Enma and Goma established. You also have the Mystics, you have Orochi, you have Susanoo, you have Yamato no Orochi as well. So you have these figures that are rooted in mythology and rooted in Shintoism that you could potentially use for a fully fledged game. Because I kind of felt that Orochi 4 kind of reaching out and doing Greek mythology and Norse mythology was a bit much. Genuinely it was. I think it was becoming a bit too much. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm actually really happy to record it, to be fair with you, because this game was interesting. You know, it wasn't my cup of tea. It was still enjoyable, but it kind of opens up the floor for more discussions from the community. So I'm hoping to bring some guests on and sort of draft out what our game would be in a new side format of the show. So I'm not going to say what it is, but we are testing it out. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of GALP.